Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are undertaking a truly monumental deep dive into management education curriculum.
A full one.
It's called BUS 106, Principles of Management. And this isn't just, a textbook review. This is a detailed look at 15 study units.
All designed for undergraduate students focusing on management in both private and public enterprises.
So we're effectively jumping into a structured, comprehensive view of management theory and how it's actually applied.
Exactly. And our mission here is to sort of strip away the academic jargon and really distill the more foundational knowledge that's presented.
Right.
We're covering everything from the philosophical evolution of management, those initial debates about efficiency, all the way through to the really practical issues.
Like ethics, organizational structure.
Leadership in complex environments, all of it. For you, the curious learner, this provides an instant structural understanding of the entire field.
And what's really genius about this course material is how methodically it builds its definition of a manager.
It really does. It starts with historical necessity and moves right through to human psychology and the mechanisms of control.
We are essentially getting a full masterclass in management theory, and it's all packaged into 3 distinct modules.
So we'll start with Module 1.
That's right. Module 1, which lays down the historical context, defines what management even is, and covers its foundational functions, decision-making and control. So get ready, because we are going way back.
Way back.
Management is much, much older than the factory floor.
It is often a point of, intellectual complacency to assume management is a purely modern concept.
Yeah, you think of the 20th century.
You do. But the sources remind us, and quite rightly, that management is as old as human organization. We need to look far beyond American or European history to see its deep roots.
That's a fascinating place to start, because the curriculum immediately highlights the sophistication of pre-industrial administrative systems.
It does.
It specifically points to the advanced nature of early African kingdoms, like Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. These were not, loosely governed places.
Not at all. I mean, just consider the sheer complexity of maintaining a large, stable empire.
The logistics alone.
The logistics. Ghana, for instance, operated with an efficient judicial system, complete with structured lower courts and courts of appeal. That's a clear organizational chart in action.
And what about the military?
Even more impressive, perhaps, is the logistical management of a massive, disciplined military force, like Ghana's 200,000 warrior army.
200,000.
Managing the provisioning, the training, the command structure, and the deployment of that many people required world-class planning and control systems long before the word manager even existed.
And the Egyptians, that's another classic example of management on a truly monumental scale.
Absolutely.
The pharaohs and their viziers, they weren't just royalty. Functionally, they were the top executives planning the construction of the pyramids, organizing vast irrigation projects.
Engineering canals. These projects demanded the careful coordination of thousands of laborers, sourcing materials, adhering to deadlines.
All classic managerial tasks.
Planning and directing. This, plus the commerce management practiced by the Babylonians, the Romans, the Greeks, it all proves that objective-driven coordination is just an inherent human necessity.
But the real seismic shift came with the Industrial Revolution.
It did. This period, fueled by intellectual awakening from figures like Galileo and Watt, led to an accelerated accumulation of resources and, crucially, the concentration of workforces.
And that's the key. Suddenly, you have hundreds of employees crammed under one roof in these new large-scale enterprises.
And that spatial and demographic shift created entirely new and urgent management problems.
I mean, think about it. The traditional owner-manager, who used to know every employee and every single process.
He could no longer oversee anything efficiently. This forced the formalization of concepts we now just take for granted.
Like division of labor.
Division of labor, specialization of tasks, and the delegation of authority.
But this transition was, it was fraught with some deep societal friction, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The early industrial mentality was harsh. Employers often viewed employees crudely as interchangeable tools or machine parts.
Which led to resentment.
Deep resentment among the workforce because of the dangerous factory conditions and, of course, the meager wages. The workers, in turn, often restricted their output to try and protect their jobs.
And this friction really set the stage for the formal study of how to manage people and production efficiently. It's what birthed the early schools of management thought.
And the first, arguably the most impactful, was the scientific management movement.
Which focused squarely on the shop floor, on production efficiency.
The goal was simple but revolutionary. Maximize the entrepreneur's revenue by systematically increasing employee productivity. And Frederick W. Taylor, the father of scientific management, he spearheaded this.
Right, and he called for a complete mental revolution.
A complete mental revolution on the part of both management and labor.
What I found really startling here was how Taylor defined scientific management by what it isn't.
Go on.
He says it's not just a fancy cost system. It's not just piecework payment. It's not merely timing people with a stopwatch.
No.
The essence was fundamentally changing the average employee's output and improving managerial efficiency through the scientific study of work.
And he believed managers had a duty to educate employees.
To prove to them that high output at a low cost was the only true guarantor of job stability and, financial security for the worker.
And his principles provided the roadmap for this revolution. First, you replace the traditional rule of thumb methods with scientifically gathered data.
Second, you carefully select and systematically develop your employees to maximize their potential.
Third, you teach them the tested scientific methods for their job. And finally, a clear separation of duties.
Management takes on planning and organizing, and labor executes.
Precisely. Taylor's insistence that management shouldn't rely on intuition, but rather subject every job to critical analysis was just pivotal.
And he was building on the earlier work of Charles Babbage, who stressed the incredible benefits of division of labor.
With the famous pin production example.
Right. He showed how specializing in just one step of the process drastically saved time and allowed workers to acquire a high level of skill much, much faster.
So moving up from the shop floor, the next major force was the administrative school, and this was dominated by the French engineer Henri Fayol.
And his focus was different. While Taylor focused on doing the job efficiently, Fayol focused on the overall administration and structure of the entire enterprise.
Yes, he wanted to define the universal principles that applied to all managers at all levels.
We can't list all 14 of his principles without, losing the listener entirely. But we have to highlight some of the most revolutionary concepts.
Like unity of command.
Exactly. Unity of command, which states that an employee should receive orders from only one superior.
It seems so obvious in modern organizations, but at the time, it cut right through all that overlapping authority.
Or esprit de corps.
The idea that management must actively foster harmony and union and mutual understanding among its personnel.
Those 2 points, combined with the scalar chain, the line of authority from top to bottom, and the need for discipline, it provided the world's first comprehensive blueprint for an entire enterprise.
It really did. Fayol defined the management functions of planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and controlling that are still taught today.
And finally, we get to the modern approaches, which Harold Kuntz famously lamented as the management theory jungle.
A great name for it. As the world got more complex, theorists started classifying management based on all these different lenses.
Kuntz noted schools like the Management Process School, which upheld Fayol's ideas.
There was the empirical school, which tried to learn only from case analyses of successful managers, a strategy that was criticized because, yesterday's success doesn't guarantee tomorrow's victory.
Then you had the Human Relations School,
which brought in psychology and sociology, focusing on motivation and interpersonal relationships.
And then the Decision Theory School and the Mathematical School just gets more and more complex.
It does. But the ultimate trend, the thing that tries to reconcile this whole jungle of ideas, is the systems concept.
Ah, okay. Explain that.
Instead of looking at a single principle, the systems concept insists on viewing the organization as a total system.
Made up of subsystems.
Exactly. Interrelated functional subsystems like production, marketing, finance, HR. The core idea is that a manager's success relies entirely on coordinating these parts, ensuring they're integrated and working towards the same objective, not just operating in their own silos.
So it's the closest we get to a unified theory of management in this whole curriculum.
It really is.
So with that history established, let's try and nail down the nature of management itself. The curriculum asks a pretty fundamental question. Is it an art or is it a science?
And the answer it provides is unequivocal. It's both.
How so?
Management is profoundly an art because it requires vision, it requires intuition, and the craft of imposing pattern and order onto what is often chaotic human and market behavior.
Like a conductor of an orchestra.
That's a perfect analogy. The music is the science, the notes and the timing, but the energy and cohesion that the conductor provides, that's the art.
And at the same time, It is a science.
Yes, because it relies on systematic procedures, scientific methods pioneered by Taylor, and decision-making that's derived from tested principles. Data, not just gut feeling.
So the successful manager has to blend that structured science with flexible experience and judgment.
They absolutely must. And this blend is necessary because of what's called the universality of management.
Meaning the functions are the same everywhere.
Precisely. The basic functions plan, organize, staff, direct, and control, they're identical whether you are managing a multinational corporation, a nonprofit hospital, a government agency,
Or a small startup.
the content of the job changes, but the managerial tasks themselves, making decisions, setting policies, communicating, they remain constant. And that's why that know-how is so transferable across sectors.
Now, this universality brings us immediately to a core necessity: organizational goals. The curriculum warns that if your objectives are not well articulated, specific, and measurable,
Then management inevitably defaults to management by crisis or management by drives, which just signals deep-seated incompetence.
and this is where the course material pivots to the specific realities of the Nigerian context.
Yes.
And the analysis of the Nigerian civil service is, well, it's quite critical. It's characterized by a damaging lack of clear, measurable objectives.
And when the stated aim is something as nebulous as to serve the people, how do you possibly measure performance? How do you allocate resources or hold executives accountable?
You can't.
Peter Drucker is cited to emphasize that without defined targets, effective management is simply impossible.
The practical consequence, according to the text, is a system that's just choked by personality clashes, excessive red tapeism, and debilitating bureaucracy.
And key executives, because they lack clear targets, they become mere administrators focused on following procedure rather than achieving results. They lose their initiative because the environment doesn't reward goal attainment.
And moving beyond the public sector, the curriculum then dives into the objectives of Nigerian businessmen and the prevalence of unethical business practices.
Yes, and the source here notes high incidences of bribery, unfair pricing, dishonest advertising, and collusion.
What I found really startling here was the source's willingness to tackle the raw cultural components of ethics head-on.
It's very direct. The curriculum argues that the ethical climate of an organization is heavily influenced by the prevailing moral ethics of the society it's in.
And there's this pervasive feeling shared by many company executives caught in this environment of, if you can't beat them, join them.
Yes, and they provide a vivid anecdote to ground this theoretical point, the magic cup example used by gari or rice sellers.
Right.
It illustrates the normalization of deceit in small transactions, unless the buyer is extremely vigilant and constantly monitoring the measure.
And this fosters a widespread attitude of caveat emptor. Let the buyer beware.
It does. For a manager, this means that even legitimate business operations often have to factor in accepted commission rates or bribes, sometimes 10 to 20%, into their quotations just to be competitive. It corrupts the entire chain.
That is an intensely challenging ethical environment to try and apply these universal principles in.
Immensely.
Okay, shifting gears to the practical toolkit. Decision-making is defined as a crucial management activity, the selection of an alternative course of action to achieve a clear objective.
And the course material offers a pretty profound warning here. In business, there are absolutely no right or wrong decisions, but intelligent choices.
A decision that seems correct today could be wildly unintelligent tomorrow.
Especially in developing economies that are characterized by high volatility. We're talking about unpredictable variables like political supply constraints, unknown production capacities, and opaque consumption patterns.
And this volatility affects how you classify decisions.
It does. The source distinguishes decisions made under certainty, where the consequences are fully known, from those made under risk, where you have accurate knowledge about the probability distribution of the consequences.
And then there's uncertainty.
Right, where probabilities are entirely unknown, forcing managers to rely heavily on judgment rather than statistics.
So what's the process? The standard decision-making process involves 5 stages.
You start with formulating clear goals. Second, you acquire knowledge. And this demands that the decision-maker really saturate themselves with facts, often using structured methods like brainstorming to tap into expert input.
The third is the analysis and alternative stage, the creative and logical core of the whole process. Fourth is choice or selection.
And this is where we run into the concept of satisficing.
Satisficing, so selecting the most intelligent, but not necessarily the most satisfactory solution.
Exactly, under the given constraints. In those high volatility environments we talked about, a Nigerian entrepreneur might seek short-run growth, which is a satisficing choice because the long-run future is just too uncertain.
Or they just lack the capital to wait for the absolutely optimal long-term return.
Right. Satisficing means accepting good enough because the cost of searching for perfection in time, information, and resources is simply too high.
And the final stage is implementation. A decision is useless unless it translates into action.
Which requires it to be effectively sold to the workforce through clear, persuasive communication.
The sources also emphasize group decision-making, acknowledging the power of participation with that old adage, 2 heads are better than 1.
And this is primarily facilitated through committees, which serve as crucial administrative tools for coordination and information sharing.
Committees can be permanent, like a finance board, or ad hoc, formed for a specific purpose, like a tenders board.
And a study cited in the curriculum shows they're immensely popular in Nigerian organizations, with 85% of general management departments using them.
But there's a counterpoint. The curriculum does acknowledge the criticism that poorly managed committees often just keep minutes and waste time and money.
To counteract that stagnation, the curriculum focuses on the creative thinking steps that are vital for generating innovative alternatives.
It starts with problem identification, then investigation.
Intensive research. Then comes the fascinating period of incubation where the mind just mulls the problem. It's often characterized by mental stress and frustration.
The gestation period.
It is, and that ideally leads to illumination, the sudden aha moment, which is then followed by verification.
So once we have the knowledge for an intelligent choice, the next move is to map out the strategy, which brings us to planning.
The primary management function. It's the bridge between the present and the future.
Its core purpose is to reduce uncertainty, cope with complexity, and define the objectives and activities you need to attain them.
And effective planning requires a deep-seated philosophical approach, which is broken down into the 6 Ps of planning.
Okay, what are they?
You start with philosophy, the organization's core beliefs and premises, the assumptions about the environment. Then come policies, plans, and critically, priorities.
Priorities dictate resource allocation, making sure your time, your money, your materials are all directed to the highest priority goals.
A good plan with poor priorities is doomed because resources will just be diffused across trivial tasks.
This is all encompassed within strategic planning, the long-range planning done by top management, often looking out up to 10 years.
The course references William Gaelick's types of strategies. There's the stability strategy for when the environment is predictable, essentially leave well enough alone.
Then the growth strategy, which is expansion, diversification, or mergers.
And conversely, the retrenchment strategy. This involves cutbacks, often seen during a recession, like the severe downsizing that airlines and automakers had to do in the late 70s.
And the most complex is the combination strategy,
which large organizations often use, maybe expanding in one division while they're cutting costs in another.
We wrap this section up by clarifying 3 terms that always get mixed up: policies, procedures, and rules.
A crucial distinction. Policies are general guidelines that allow for managerial judgment and flexibility.
Like, we prioritize employee safety.
Right. Procedures then prescribe the exact chronological steps for implementing that policy with very little discretion.
The 6 steps for reporting an injury.
And rules are the most specific guides to action, leaving absolutely no room for judgment.
No smoking in this area.
Exactly. Understanding that distinction is crucial for knowing how much freedom a manager has at different organizational levels.
Okay, so control is the necessary flip side of planning. If planning is looking forward, control is looking back and checking if we got where we intended.
That's a great way to put it. It's defined as the dynamic process of assuring resources are used effectively and efficiently to accomplish objectives.
Maintaining that equilibrium between means and ends.
And control is vital because of modern complexities like decentralization, where local managers make decisions, but accountability rests higher up, and the inevitability of human errors that require correction.
The control process itself breaks down into 4 essential steps. First, you establish predetermined goals or standards that are specific and measurable.
Like a sales volume target or a target return on investment. Second, you measure performance continuously, using metrics consistent with those standards.
And this step requires understanding what to evaluate. The curriculum gives 5 evaluation types.
Right, so using a sales manager as an example, you could measure effort, which is how many sales calls someone makes. That's an input measure, often a poor indicator of results.
Or you could measure effectiveness.
The number of clients placed in output measure. Then there's adequacy, the ratio of output to the total market need, which is very hard to define. And crucially, efficiency.
Output relative to input.
Yeah.
Doing more with the same sales budget.
Precisely. The curriculum also emphasizes financial measurement tools, things like the current ratio to assess liquidity, or ratios like net profits to sales, which give vital insight into profitability.
The third step in the control process is comparing actual performance with expected performance, actively identifying any deviations.
And finally, the fourth step is taking correction action. This has to be quick, decisive, and surgically disclose the exact problem area so you can fix it.
When we look at types of control, we differentiate based on timing.
We do. Pre-controls, or feed-forward controls, are preventive. They're designed to eliminate the causes of deviation before the activity even begins. Think capital budgeting before a major investment.
Those are distinct from yes-no controls,
which act as sequential checkpoints during an activity to ensure subsequent steps should proceed, like a quality control inspection on an assembly line.
And to make all this work, managers have to follow specific behavioral guidelines.
The control system has to be simple enough to be understood and acceptable to the employees being measured. But most importantly, it has to operate on the exception principle.
Meaning, only significant deviations get flagged.
Exactly. Only important deviations are brought to management's attention. This prevents executives from just drowning in reports showing routine conformity.
We move now to Module 2, starting with how you actually structure the organization.
Right. So organizing is defined as coordinating human efforts to achieve an objective by establishing relationships and determining the best use of resources.
It's building the body within which management takes place.
And the source outlines two fundamental structures. The line organization is the simplest, with a direct, unbroken flow of authority from the board down to the lower levels.
The advantage there is clarity and speed.
It is. But the disadvantage is that it tends to neglect specialists and often leads to the overworking of key decision makers.
Which is an issue addressed by the line and staff organization.
Best for large, complex organizations. Line executives retain command authority, focusing on the immediate objective. Staff executives, like HR or legal, provide that advisory or support relationship,
freeing up the line executive
and offering specialist expertise. This structure immediately brings up the concept of authority, which is defined as the right to act or decide, and it's vested in the position, not the individual.
But the nature of authority is complicated by the acceptance theory of authority from Chester Barnard.
It really is.
So wait, if authority is granted by the subordinate, doesn't that make the entire organizational hierarchy a kind of psychological negotiation?
Precisely. Barnard's theory states that a subordinate decides whether to obey. If the directive is perceived as falling outside their zone of indifference,
meaning they feel the order is improper or harmful?
Yes, or contrary to organizational goals, they may refuse. So subordinate acceptance is paramount to the effectiveness of authority. The superior's power is just a reinforcing mechanism, not the source of authority itself.
And that psychological negotiation feeds directly into the crucial principles of delegation.
The first being the parity of authority and responsibility.
Meaning the authority granted to a subordinate must perfectly match the responsibility assigned.
And a lack of that parity leads to crippling inefficiency and frustration. The curriculum highlights this as a common complaint in the Nigerian context,
where subordinates are given responsibility but not the actual clout to get things done.
You can't be held responsible for something you lacked the authority to control.
The second principle provides the counterbalance, the absoluteness of accountability.
The accountability to one's superior cannot be assigned or delegated. The executive can delegate the task, but if that task fails, the executive who delegated it remains fully accountable.
It prevents passing the buck.
Exactly. When designing the structure, management also has to consider decentralization, which is delegating decision-making authority down to lower management levels.
And central to all of this is the span of control.
The number of subordinates a manager can effectively manage. A narrow span leads to tall structures, improving supervisory efficiency. A broad span forces the manager to delegate more heavily.
And several factors affect that span.
The competence of the supervisor and the employee, the type of work being done, and even the geographical location of the team.
Okay, let's talk about communication, which is called the most important and most effective ingredient of the management process.
A simple but powerful definition. Passing information and understanding so that the meaning is identical for both the sender and the receiver.
The core of this is the Berto model.
A dynamic, ongoing, interactive loop. Sender, encoding, message, channel, decoding by the receiver, action, and crucially, feedback to close that loop.
In superior subordinate communication, information flows downward directions, procedures, and upward, like reports and feedback.
For downward communication to be effective, employees need to know not just what to do, but why their job is important. That context increases their acceptance and commitment.
And the message must always be coded in the language of the receiver. Technical jargon is just noise,
Then you have the notorious grapevine, the informal communication channel.
which managers often fear.
They do, but it can be beneficial for getting information out quickly. The problem is it's prone to severe distortion, particularly protective screening, where subordinates filter bad news before passing it up the chain.
So the advice is to use the grapevine to complement the formal system, not replace it.
Exactly. But communication faces several serious barriers. First, noise barriers, things like poor timing or information overload, where you get more data than you can possibly process.
We also face perception issues, like stereotyping or the halo effect.
But the most pervasive barrier is the semantic barrier, the problem of multi-meaning words.
That point about semantics is so critical. The curriculum states that the word run alone has 15 dictionary definitions.
So if a manager just says, we need to run the next quarter aggressively, that phrase can mean almost anything. Precise, unambiguous language is paramount.
Moving to the application of effort, directing is the action function, guiding human effort toward goals.
And this depends entirely on the organizational climate, the degree of autonomy, the reward structure, and how conflicts are managed.
Which leads us naturally into leadership, defined as the art of influencing and inspiring subordinates to perform duties willingly and enthusiastically.
It's complex. The formula is L is a function of the followers, the goal, their willingness, and the situation.
And there are several theories of leadership. The earliest, trait theory, argued that leaders are born, not made.
Which was later criticized for ignoring situational dynamics. A successful general might make a terrible CEO.
This criticism led to the behavioral theories from the Ohio State studies.
Which isolated observable dimensions. Consideration, which is building rapport and trust, and initiating structure, which is defining roles and giving directions.
So it shifted the focus from who the leader is to what the leader does.
Then came the realization that context is king with contingency theory. Leader effectiveness is entirely dependent upon the situation. A leader has to be flexible.
This leads into path-goal theory,
Which suggests the leader's main role is to clear the path for the followers, making the journey to the goal and the rewards clear and achievable.
There are also prescriptive models, like the Vroom-Yetten model.
Which tells leaders how they should behave in decision-making, on a spectrum from autocratic to fully democratic, depending on the problem.
And we look at the managerial grid by Blake and Mouton, mapping leadership on two axes: concern for people and concern for task. The goal is a 9-9.
Maximum dedication to both the task structure and the human element.
These theories all manifest in three primary leadership styles.
You have the autocratic style, which is dictatorial. You have the participative or democratic style, which consults subordinates and leads to higher morale.
And finally, laissez-faire.
Minimal control, only effective with highly intelligent, self-aware teams who are capable of complete self-direction.
The final function in this module is staffing, ensuring the right people are in the right jobs.
This covers the entire human resource spectrum: compensation, labor relations, health and safety, all of it.
And the process starts with forecasting human resource needs.
Managers use expert opinion, sometimes refined by the Delphi technique, which uses anonymous surveys among experts to achieve a consensus forecast.
They also use trend projection, like linear extrapolation or indexation, matching employment growth to an index like sales volume.
And a vital distinction is made between recruitment and selection.
Recruitment is the positive function, attracting candidates and widening the applicant pool, opening the top of the funnel.
And selection is the negative function, the rigorous process of eliminating the unqualified and choosing the most suitable person, narrowing the bottom of the funnel.
Organizations seek candidates from internal sources, like promotions and transfers, which boosts morale.
Or external sources, like new college graduates or people from competitor organizations, which brings in fresh expertise.
The selection process itself is illustrated using the successive hurdles method.
A sequential elimination process. Candidates have to clear steps like the application form, a written exam, a preliminary interview, and various tests.
And failure at any step results in rejection.
This method mitigates risk by thoroughly vetting candidates through multiple layers before the company commits significant resources. The need for this scientific selection is paramount.
Not just for fairness, but to prevent the recurring costs of hiring the wrong person. The wrong hire is an expensive liability.
While the right hire is an invaluable asset.
Module 3 begins by defining the crucial distinction between training and development.
Training is short-term, technical, and primarily for non-managers to acquire specific skills. Think of it as fixing a specific hole in a bucket. On-the-job training is the most common method.
And development.
Development is managerial and career-oriented. It's longer-term exposure through conferences or case studies to prepare an employee to assume broader duties. This is about building a bigger, stronger boat, not just patching a hole.
The need for training is often signaled by clear warning signs.
Lack of job interest, low productivity, tardiness, high absenteeism, excessive complaints, or just poor quality output.
The text likens untrained employees to a dull school pupil. He hates school and likes to absent himself.
Because they lack the competence and confidence to succeed. The objectives are straightforward: increase productivity, lower turnover, and higher morale.
Now let's turn to motivation, the energizing force that maintains goal-directed behavior. The fundamental premise is psychological.
A satisfied need ceases to motivate. Only an unsatisfied need drives behavior.
The motivation process is cyclical.
A need creates tension, which initiates motivating behavior directed toward a goal, leading to a reduction of tension.
To sustain motivation, management has to constantly create real or imagined needs. The desire for a company car, a secretary, privileges that signify status.
And we have to analyze the major motivation theories presented. First, Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
The 5 successive levels: physiological, safety, social, esteem, and finally, self-actualization.
The fulfillment need: what a man can be, he must be. And the concept of successive saturation is key. Once a lower need is met, it loses its power to motivate.
This helps us understand McGregor's postulates.
Theory X managers assume employees dislike work, are lazy, and are motivated only by money or threats. This often creates a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Whereas Theory Y managers assume work is natural, people are self-directed, and commitment is linked to intrinsic rewards.
The most nuanced analysis comes from Hertzberg's two-factor theory,
which cleanly distinguishes between factors that cause satisfaction and factors that merely prevent dissatisfaction.
Right. Motivators, like achievement, recognition, responsibility, and the work itself, cause job satisfaction. They align with Maslow's higher-order needs.
Then there are the hygiene factors, or dissatisfiers.
Compensation, supervision, working conditions. These prevent dissatisfaction, but they cannot by themselves create satisfaction.
So if your salary, a hygiene factor, is fair, you're just not dissatisfied, you're neutral.
Exactly. Only achievement, a motivator, leads to long-term intrinsic drive. This is why just increasing pay doesn't motivate a skilled employee who's seeking self-actualization.
The takeaway is that management has to design jobs that satisfy those motivational needs, moving employees beyond neutrality and linking performance directly to personal fulfillment.
Which helps combat those defensive behaviors like aggression or withdrawal that arise when goals aren't met.
We return briefly to forecasting, emphasizing its essential nature for strategic planning.
And accurate forecasting has to span multiple areas: economic, technological, competition, and critically, other volatile political events.
The source uses a powerful example here.
The seizure of American assets, like those of Kennecott and ITT in Chile during a communist takeover. For managers in volatile regions, failing to forecast that kind of political risk can be an existential catastrophe.
Forecasting techniques break down into qualitative and quantitative.
Qualitative techniques like the jury of executive opinion or the Delphi method rely on judgment when data is scarce.
Quantitative techniques use statistical models based on past activities, time series analysis, seasonal variation, and cyclical variations.
The core message is that forecasting is an art dependent on human judgment. Faulty assumptions will always yield inaccurate results.
We also have a quick review of delegation and decentralization, reinforcing the principles of parity and absoluteness.
So why do executives still fail to delegate? The curriculum lists key barriers: the "I can do it better myself" fallacy, fear of diminished authority, and a lack of confidence in subordinates.
And this failure frustrates employees by denying them that intrinsic satisfaction of accomplishing something independently.
The solution involves building subordinate confidence through training and recognition and developing control systems that alert an executive to problems without requiring constant supervision.
Finally, we delve into the pervasive influence of social responsibility.
This is behavior that actively avoids destructive activities and contributes positively to human betterment. The curriculum states an inescapable truth. If business fails to address social issues voluntarily, government will inevitably step in to regulate.
And business responsibility spans customers, employees, government, and society at large.
The source then critically examines the Nigerian reality and neglect. One of the critical social problems identified is smuggling.
Which negatively impacts local industries. Textiles, shoes, pharmaceuticals, they can't compete with cheap contraband goods.
Furthermore, oil companies are cited for their damaging environmental practices, polluting farmlands and fish ponds without adequate compensation.
And the reasons for this widespread neglect are systemic.
Many indigenous businesses are too small to afford social considerations. Large enterprises are often foreign-owned, prioritizing profit maximization. And there's a lack of professionalism in management style, where social responsibility is seen as a novel concept.
Most fundamentally, society itself expects little, as laws on environmental protection aren't seriously enforced.
So what does this all mean for the aspiring manager? The curriculum concludes that Nigerian businesses have to view social responsibility not as an optional charity, but as a tax or license fee required to operate legitimately.
They must actively ensure their policies support national priorities and help enforce ethical norms.
Because unless profit maximization is balanced with social responsibility, the overall society will decay, eventually undermining the very market that business operates in.
We've mapped out a truly comprehensive curriculum here. We've moved from the philosophical debates of Taylor and Fayol all the way through to modern realities of communication, motivation, and social responsibility.
It highlights that effective management is an intricate balancing act between scientific principle, human psychology, and ethical practice.
Absolutely. The depth of structure, from Fayol's 14 principles to the successive hurdles of selection and the analysis of Maslow, McGregor, and Herzberg, it gives you a complete, actionable roadmap.
But perhaps the most enduring nugget is that explicit discussion on management challenges specific to the local context, particularly the societal acceptance of unethical conduct and the struggle for clear goals in the civil service.
Indeed, this deep dive shows that management principles are universal in function plan, organize, staff, direct, control, but they're always profoundly tempered by the unique social, political, and ethical environment in which they are applied.
This raises an important question, particularly given our discussion on motivation. We noted that a manager's failure to help employees satisfy their needs often gives rise to destructive defensive behaviors, like aggression, withdrawal, or apathy.
And that money and status are often only measures of success, not the core needs themselves.
So here's a provocative thought for you to explore next time you're reflecting on leadership. Given that intrinsic psychological link between an individual's unmet needs and their susceptibility to those defensive behaviors, how profoundly might a truly effective motivational strategy one focus squarely on Maslow's higher-order needs and Herzberg's motivators fundamentally change the prevailing if you can't beat them, join them ethical climate of an entire organization?